The program will begin in 10 minutes. Please take your seats. The program will begin in 5 minutes. Please take your seats. The program is about to begin. Please take your seats. The program is about to begin. Please take your seats. The program is about to begin.
Okay, ready?
David, what initially sparked your interest in this topic of longevity?
15 years ago, I turned 60, and I began to wonder how much longer I'm likely to live and what I could do to extend my life. On longevity, I talk with the leading experts in science and medicine to educate people about how they might be able to change their conduct so that they can live a happier and healthier life. I'm David Rubenstein. Join me on a 4-part journey as I explore the great quest for longevity. Premieres Tuesday, only on Bloomberg.
Please welcome to the stage Bloomberg's Meg Szabo.
Hi everyone, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed lunch. I hope you were able to enjoy one of the breakouts or chat with other attendees. That was a clip for our newest show from Bloomberg called Longevity. That will be premiering on Tuesday on Bloomberg exclusively, so please check it out if you'd like to. And also, if you'd like to hear more from Bloomberg, we do have these QR code behind me you can scan, will be appearing shortly. Sorry, I'm standing right in the middle of it. So there you go. If you'd like to get a complimentary 3-month subscription to Bloomberg.com, you can hear more from us there if you scan that. And then just a reminder that we'd love to hear from you today using our hashtag #BloombergGreen on social media. And also, if you scan the QR code behind me, the next one, you can view our agenda. You can also submit questions and respond to our polls today. So with that, let's get started with our next conversation. Please welcome to the stage Samantha Holloway, owner of the Seattle Kraken, for a conversation with Bloomberg's Jason Kelly.
Thank you, Meg. All right, welcome back from lunch as people continue to trickle in. So we're going to talk about sports, and the reason you know is because we're both wearing sneakers, right? I mean, it's just not planned, but it's sort of the wardrobe. Sam, it's great to see you. It's great to see you here in your town, and I want to start by talking to you and hearing from you. Now, owning a very successful hockey franchise and co-owning an arena, this is very much a team and a venue that intentionally reflects this place. How did you go about doing that? How do you do that on sort of a regular basis? I mean, not just from a sustainability perspective, but from a cultural perspective.
Yeah, I think what I've come to learn over the last several years is that owning a sports team is way more than just what happens on the ice. That is very important, and we are working on that. But it's all rooted in community, and it matters how you do it. And we were fortunate to be able to build this franchise from the ground up, which included the arena project, obviously with partners, and obviously that was my dad's project with OVG, and so yeah, it's much.
Just to set the stage,
yes.
Sorry to interrupt you. Your dad, late David Bonderman, very famous investor, and Oakview Group,
yes.
who is one of the most successful sort of developers of these sorts of arenas.
Right.
Sorry.
Right, and it was a very difficult project because there's a historic roof that couldn't be touched, and there's a lot of history in the arena, but it did need to be completely redone, and it's in Seattle Center, so it's kind of the core of the city where it's not just sports, but it's music, it's arts, it's a place for tourists, it's a place for locals. It's just a great meeting place, and so to be able to do it in a way that reflected the values of our organization, my father, this city, to make it the most sustainable arena in the world was really important to our fans and to everyone involved.
And is there something that you feel like, because I know you personally and your team interacts a lot with your fans and various stakeholders, and I want to talk a little bit about that more in a second, but is there something from a sustainability perspective that you feel like really resonated with the fans that people sort of noticed or you noticed as being especially impactful?
I mean, I think there's a couple of the little stats that people latch onto, but I think the fact that it's not lip service and it's done with authenticity, and we're the biggest and only arena in the world to be certified in a certain way. And so, but things people really love, that we use the rainwater for the ice. Right. That's not done for any other team. Right. We don't have any single-use plastics. All of that kind of stuff people latch onto. 25% of people take public transportation to every event, and we subsidize that for every event, not just games. So there's a lot that we're doing all together that I think people appreciate that we're doing all of it.
Yeah. We sat on this, Meg and I sat on this stage last night and interviewed Jane Fonda. And, one of the things that, she talks about in her very Jane Fonda way is, all the, various stakeholders who are involved, whether it's public officials, whether in your case it's fans, it's players, it's sponsors. You can never satisfy everyone, but how have you approached sort of that balance? Because I feel like for a lot of people in this room, they're, constantly in their activism or in their businesses having to manage those things. Any tips around that? Because this is a hard job.
I think it's all about the team you have, because people are responsible for managing different stakeholders. And obviously our organization is led by Todd Leiweke, who, if you know him, he is the greatest. And he cares about community more than anybody in a real way, and he knows everybody. And from there, he built out a team that reflected that. And so it's important, to not forget to call this person or that person, from your partners to your fans to your investors to your employees. I mean, there's a lot. Of course, the public officials, I mean, it's endless, really.
Yeah.
And you won't get it right all the time.
Right. And what are the things that, because I know that, you're part of this interesting sort of next generation of sports team owners. I know you're talking to other owners, not just here in Seattle, but elsewhere all the time. What do you pick up from them in terms of leadership, decision making, et cetera? What are the things that are in your mind that are advice that you've been given from them?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to stay focused, right? There's a lot of noise in sports, and there's a lot of ups and downs, and you have to keep your emotions out of it, because if you just show up as a fan, you will make decisions differently than if you show up as an owner.
Yeah. And what have you learned about, I mean, it's interesting, so I'm going to plug my own work here for a second. So I co-host a show with Alex Rodriguez, who started his career here, and, he is very candid about how passionate the Seattle fans are, to say the least. What have you learned about Seattle fans? What makes them different?
I mean, so my main frame of reference is being in Seattle as an owner. So I just know the fans here. I've been a fan elsewhere. But the fans here are loyal, and they're loud, and they support a lot of the teams. So I think the teams in general support each other here, which I don't know if that's true elsewhere. It may be unique to here. But I think the fans do as well. And, we haven't had that many seasons, but they're sticking with us, even through ups and downs.
Yeah. And what are, as you think about sort of building, again, this sort of like stakeholder base, whether it's sponsorship, you had to start essentially from the ground up, a great sports town. We're going to talk about maybe that growing or returning in a minute. But how have you sort of gone out to build the community of sponsors and supporters?
Yeah.
What's the pitch?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's to be on the journey with us, right? To be part of something bigger than sports. But sports is one of the only things left that brings everybody together, right? You go in that building during a Kraken game, and everybody is there for the same reason, and to have a great time, and there's no judgment, or there's little judgment. And
there's a lot of judgment about certain things.
Well, but
and I bet you
especially
hear it.
In the kind of macro universe right now, sports is really galvanizing, and I think that's really important to our partners as well. And then how we act as an organization is really important. And again, I keep saying, there's what you say and there's what you do.
Yeah.
And you really have to walk the walk, and that starts with leadership. And it's really important to us that we show our partners we really care about them, right? They are on the journey with us, and what we do reflects them, and we have to take that very seriously.
Were you surprised when you moved, because you had a successful career in technology and investing, when you moved into this role, were you surprised at how much people do care? I mean, you were a fan, but when you're sitting in the owner's seat, in the owner's box, rink side, next to the ice, and I'm guessing when you're out on the street, people are telling you how they feel.
They do, not as much as, maybe in a few years, but I do, I don't think I was surprised. I think that it's just different, and maybe I'm surprised by what they care about, right? That some of the small things matter more than some of the big things, but you also, again, you have
Give me an example.
You have to,
like playing time?
Yeah, like something like, why is he on that line versus whatever, or, and I'm like, I thought you cared about, ticket prices or whatever, and so, but I think you have to listen. So, I'm big on listening to customers, listening to fans, and taking feedback, whether that's good or bad, but that's different than not listening to the noise, right? And you have to figure out how to manage that. Yeah.
What are the things that you've changed? Just thinking about sort of the learnings. What are the things that you've changed, maybe based on feedback? Because you're known as you're a very real-time leader. You guys are very responsive. Again, sort of this new generation of very sort of responsive ownership. Are there things that you've been able to adjust on the fly based on what you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, we've changed, all kinds of different experiences in the arena, from pregame, listening to fans on that. We had a whole reinvention a few months ago around season ticket member packages and pricing, because we were listening to folks, because we, built a very expensive building and priced everything before the pandemic, and we listened to fans, and we wanted to make it family friendly. So yeah, we're listening all the time and trying to make changes when we can.
Yeah. One of the things that we in this room and certainly in this city are all looking at is another sport. It used to be played here.
It's still played here, just by the women.
Still. Well done. Well done. And very successfully.
Yes, yes.
Sue Bird was on this stage with us last year. It was previously played as well.
Yes, yes.
By men in the National Basketball Association.
Yes.
Good Lord.
Sorry, you walked right into it.
I really did. I really did. Man, that's going to leave a mark. But tell us about your efforts, which have been, pretty public, around bringing the NBA back to Seattle.
Yeah, well, we have been public that Climate Pledge Arena is ready. It does host basketball now. It's built for an NBA team when the NBA feels ready to expand. The fans here are obviously ready.
Right.
This is a great sports market. It will be a great basketball market. It will be very complementary to hockey. But we're getting our ducks in a row, and then we'll be patient, because it may happen soon. It may happen later. And in the meantime, we'll run a hockey team.
So when you look around and you see, the Celtics going for $6 billion, you see the Lakers going for, at a valuation of $10 billion, does that change your enthusiasm? Does it change your calculus at all around, wanting to put a team here?
Listen, they're all just data points, and, each day we get more data, and that is certainly part of the decision-making process. But, it will have to be expensive enough to be worth it for the NBA to do it. But also, we operate as a business, and you have to run as a business if you want to be able to give back to the community in the way we want. And we want it, if we're going to bring the Sonics back here, if we're lucky enough to be able to do that, we don't want them to leave again. So it has to be done in the right way. So, sure, it's part of our decision making to understand what the price is. So we're working on a deal with no timeline and no price, and that's difficult. So we'll have to see. But sure, like for us, we need this to be we need it to be accessible to fans as well too. And at some point it's not. Right.
And so when you, more broadly, you've seen valuations go up in the NHL as well. These are professional sports. We talk about this all the time. And referencing back to your very successful WNBA team here in Seattle, you look at the expansion fees for the WNBA now reaching $250 million, a record expansion happening pretty rapidly. They're similar in women's soccer as well. See, now I'm just trying to prove that I am paying attention to this stuff. I'm working hard here, Sam. Thank you. But, when you see broadly valuations in men's sports and in women's sports, you're a smart investor. You're a smart business person. Like, what do you make of, how these numbers are trending?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of demand, and I think there's still a lot of unknowns, right? People are constantly changing how they consume media, and that's going to include basketball, and that's going to change over time, right? And so I think there's a lot we still don't know. I mentioned the macro environment. There's a lot of uncertainty right now. So, again, I come from tech, and we had a time where valuations got a little crazy there, and it can be good, it can be bad. So I think it's a little early to know, but I'm certainly very bullish on the NHL and those valuations and where that league is going, and I think there's a lot of upside, and I'm less familiar with the NBA, obviously.
And what are the main things, from the business? You and I are actually going to talk again next week, or when the NHL is here in town for their annual business meetings. You can't get rid of me that easily. But as you think about the business of the NHL, as you get deeper into it, what are the most attractive elements, especially for this sport? It's historically been sort of the fourth league in North America. what is it doing? What does it need to do more of to continue to hold that spot and continue to get this sort of mind share?
Yeah. I think it tends to get a reputation for being less forward-thinking, but I think it is very forward-thinking. And I think Gary actually does a really great job promoting that, and the whole league does, working with the individual franchises in terms of how we're reaching new fans. Four Nations was a huge hit. I think people are getting really excited about hockey who didn't know about hockey before. And obviously we're bringing hockey to this market. The PWHL is coming. It's really exciting. Like, there's a ton of excitement in this market for hockey, but we still have a lot of work to do. And I think that's true with hockey everywhere. It just wasn't the top sport for a long time, but I think that's changing because it's fast, it's exciting, the players are interesting, they're really personable. It's just a different vibe, and I think people are catching on.
Yeah, it is interesting to see the PWHL, which is the Professional Women's Hockey League. You know, Billie Jean King's involved in that. Mark Walter, who suddenly has become like one of the most interesting owners in sports with the Lakers deal. How has women's hockey sort of figured into your calculus, especially as you think about this as a hockey market?
Yeah, we think it's hugely additive. I mean, we hosted a game last year, and there was a huge turnout and people who hadn't been to the arena before, right? And so we want to grow the sport in general. Obviously, I'm bullish on women's sports. They're going to practice out of our facility. We think there's great opportunity for both of us to partner, and I think it just helps hockey everywhere.
Right. And as you think about you mentioned your background in tech, and sort of as we start to wrap up, thinking about the arena specifically, it's incredibly tech forward. How do you keep up with the pace of innovation, especially when it comes to arenas? Because there's always like a new shiny arena, which yours maybe still is, certainly was.
Yeah.
How do you ensure that the tech is right? How do you ensure that that there really is the pace of innovation that is going to satisfy what I would imagine is a pretty demanding fan base when it comes to tech? This is a town that really knows it. Yeah.
And obviously, I'd be remiss not to mention Amazon, who's a big partner, and obviously cared so much about sustainability that they didn't put their name on the building, they put the cause on the building. Right, and which has driven a lot of what we're doing and shared values, et cetera. But obviously with that partnership, we're very tech forward, and it's top of mind all the time, and we demand it of ourselves. And so we are still the most sustainable arena in the world, and I still think the best and most unique, and I think we will be for a long time.
Is there a favorite tech element of the arena for you?
I think that the tech that we've incorporated into our pregame, maybe if I could say, has evolved so much in the last several seasons. I think it's really fun to be a fan. You can now participate through your phone right in the pregame in terms of the light show. I like that the best because that's what my kids like the best.
Yeah. Well, speaking of kids, we were talking backstage about not just the sports element, but the entertainment piece of the arena. Talk to us about sort of how that fits into the overall, not just business model, but also the sort of cultural relevance of having this arena. I think Katy Perry's going to be here next week, Incubus is here tonight. I mean,
You're going.
I mean, who's not? I mean, who wouldn't want to anthem out to Incubus?
Yeah, exactly.
It's taking me back.
Yeah.
I should come back for Katy Perry.
Yes.
I'm so young?
Yes, it keeps you young.
Oh.
Sorry. This is going sideways.
Sam.
The point, this is a music town, and this building has history rooted in music as well as sports, and to be able to renovate it in a way that could really, you'll see tonight if you haven't been already, but the acoustics are amazing, and there's lots of different places to see music in this city, obviously, but this is central. This is the arena that's been here for so long, and it's a huge piece of what we're doing.
Right. And just as we look ahead, hopefully, to a day where the Sonics or an NBA team is playing here, you have the capacity to sort of still do all of the things, right? I mean, there's a business case to do.
For sure, and it's for the city as well. There's a business case, right? And plenty of arenas,
right?
Have many teams and music, and it's part of the art of running an arena.
Right. So, again, last minute. As you think about, obviously the basketball is on your mind and on your plate. if you think even further ahead, I think about how far ahead your dad thought in the investing world. Like, look around the corner. Like, what is this sort of broader franchise that you're ahead of now, or that you're the head of now? What does it look like? What are other businesses that you think you could be in beyond hockey and arenas and basketball?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, we have, a lot on our plate at the moment with, we also have half of Acrisure Arena in the desert with our American Hockey League team, the Firebirds. We're helping with the city and the school district in Seattle Center renovate Memorial Stadium. There's kind of a million things going on right now. So I think if we can build this into a true hockey market and get the Kraken really out there and then keep working on a basketball team, I think, that with music, I mean, I can't really think much further ahead than that.
Right.
I hope the planet's still here so we can all do whatever we'd like to do in that.
All right. Well, here's to that. Sam, thank you so much for spending some time.
Thank you,
everyone.
Much.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage Patty Kuderer, Insurance Commissioner of Washington State, Fraser McLaughlin, Chairman of Tokyo Marine GX, and Michelle Vargo, Senior Vice President of Energy Operations for Puget Sound Energy, for a conversation with Bloomberg's Leslie Kaufman.
Hello, everyone. Glad to see you this afternoon. Today and right now, we're going to start talking about some of the less exciting parts of climate change, which is disasters. I think everyone here has seen it on the news. Before we get going, I want to just ask the room a question. How many people in this room have experienced a disaster in a personal form? I mean, not watching it on TV, but a flooded basement, a flooded car, having to evacuate a home. Can I just see hands? Wow, that's a lot of people, right? Yes. I think that's only going to go up, unfortunately. Our panel today are experts in thinking about what happens when disaster hits. Their job is to think ahead. I'm going to ask all of you, they come from a very diverse, Patty, who's sitting at the end of the couch, is the insurance commissioner here in Washington State. Michelle deals with utilities. She's in charge of operations for your utility. And Fraser is an insurer of energy systems. So all of them are thinking about this from a different perspective. I just wondered if, to start it all off, I know we all experience, Patty, you've experienced disaster personally. Can you just talk a little bit about that and what it taught you about maybe the gap in resilience?
Yeah, so last November we experienced a bomb cyclone. And at that time I was a state senator and it was in my district where it hit. And that was sustained winds of about 60 miles an hour and it coming from an unusual direction. And it downed a lot of trees in the district. 114,000 people were without power for days. And 2 people lost their lives. And so we did petition FEMA twice for help. It was denied. And I can tell you that having seen what's happening with FEMA at the federal level and NOAA and the National Flood Insurance Program, it seems that what we have to be thinking about is that these costs are going to be borne by states and local governments in terms of cleanup and recovery and rebuilding alone. We're not going to have the federal government as a partner in this. And so I think we have to be looking at different products out there that can help insure these kinds of risks. There's parametric insurance, for example, that could be used for local governments as part of the solution.
Yeah, we can get into parametric. That's
way over the weeds.
That's deep and early on.
Those are some of the things I think about, and honestly, it's these kinds of disasters that keep me up at night. That's
Right.
what I think about, because, you know, you want to be as prepared as possible. You're never as prepared as you need to be, right? And we also had invested in resilient infrastructure in the state. We were the fifth most frequent user of BRIC grants through the FEMA, the Building Resilient Infrastructure grants. And those are going away as well. And so we have to pick up those costs too. But it's really important to be as forward-thinking about how to prevent and reduce the exposure as much as possible.
Right. Michelle, you talk about your own experience and what it taught you about the resilience gap as we think about it.
Yeah, sure. And I think I will just start when you asked for the personal experience. I lived through Superstorm Sandy in Hoboken, New Jersey. When that hit, I had just moved to the state, and I lost my entire storage locker. So I threw away a lot of things after that event. And I also lived in the community that was without power for many days. And then professionally, I had an opportunity to deploy in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom as an engineering officer, so rebuilt a lot of infrastructure overseas. And then as a utility operations representative, I'm heavily involved in many different storm responses. 2014, Goodell Creek fire, when I was with the Seattle City Light, we had to evacuate the hydro facility, the Skagit hydro facility. And send operation crews both west and east to avoid that disaster. And then moving on, we've experienced a heat dome out here in 2021. We've had the bomb cyclone, obviously the opposite side of the commissioner actually responding to that event from the utilities perspective. And then in 2024, we also had a really harsh cold snap here in the Pacific Northwest.
So you're dealing with like a full
wide range.
That's the great thing about climate change. It's not just heat, right? Like
Absolutely.
It's really.
And my responsibility, you know, I have the purview of both the gas and the electric system for Puget Sound Energy. And, you know, we're responsible for operating, maintaining, building, engineering that system so that it can meet the demands of the future. And then when we are going through tragic disasters like that, is how fast can we restore? And when we're rebuilding, how do we rebuild most efficiently and robustly so that we are more resilient for future events?
Fraser, do you want to talk? I know you personally haven't experienced it, but as an insurance executive, was there anything that was particularly alarming to you or informative about thinking of resilience?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, as you said, Leslie, I haven't experienced personally any form of disaster, but I've been around the renewable energy space for about 25 years now, and this is the 5th year in a row where the insurance industry has experienced in excess of $100 billion in losses as a result of natural disasters. And so you begin to, A, ask yourself why, and B, importantly, what can be done about it, which comes into the resilience factor. From my side, there's a couple of things that I would say need to be done. I think what we need to stop doing, especially in the US, is building big and building cheap. I think
hey, that's our brand. Okay.
I think that there needs to be more resilience built into projects. And let's be clear. You know, this is not a US-centric issue. I'm seeing massive natural disasters in the Middle East. I'm seeing it in Asia. I'm seeing it in Australia. I just read even in my own country, very close to where I live, there's 4 wildfires. Who would have thought? Yeah, very close to London right now. So there, you know, this is, as you said at the beginning, this is something which is not going to get better, and therefore is going to take a collective effort. So things like changing some of the building codes so that we can actually impose that contractors and people like this do build projects better, and we build in resilience. And at the same time, let's start to maybe diversify in terms of our energy mix and our energy portfolio, so that when a certain industry type is hit with something, we have more resilience and we can rely on other types of power production to keep us all going. So there's a number of things come out there.
And we should talk more about the future, but I just thought, since we talked a little bit about case studies for this, we've had 2 enormous disasters in the U.S. this year. There was the wildfires in Los Angeles, and more recent Texas, where over 100 people died in a flash flood. What are the lessons when you look at this as people who think about this? Lessons in resilience. What should Texas do differently the next time? Michelle, do you want to start? Like, what were the big lessons you looked at that and said, oh boy, if that was here, this is, let's get ready?
Yeah, first and foremost, my heart goes out to that community. What a tragic event. So terrible to see every story that comes out of that part of the country right now. But I would just say, in just reflective of the disasters that I've been a part of, coordination and communication. Early communication, good data feeding that early communication so people can actually mobilize and make good decisions, be prepared in their house or their community the best that they can be. But just on the coordination piece, when I look at what's ahead of us at Puget Sound Energy and building out our wildfire resiliency program, just the amount of coordination. I mean, there's 40 other electric utility entities in Washington State. The amount of coordination that it takes to make sure that we're all taking care of Washingtonians, it takes a great deal of coordination. And, who's spearheading that sort of effort, because we all have different constituents. So, I'm really encouraged by Washington State. We have the Office of Energy Resiliency and Emergency Management. That gives us an avenue to then coordinate amongst each other and making sure that the energy infrastructure can serve the state. So I think coordination and communication is key to any disaster.
They just took it down, but there was a chart up here that showed, maybe they'll put it back up, how few people in Texas had flood insurance. That's not unusual. Only 2% have any kind of flood insurance. So I bring it to you now, Fraser. Talk to me about what we learn about insurance. Should people be having more of it? I mean, can they afford more of it? I mean,
I don't think necessarily I don't think all of the people can afford it all of the time. And therefore, I think there needs to be more done at a government level to try and help certain parts of society. So I think that to me is very, very important. The challenge that I have is that we try and make a profit out of insurance. I know it sounds a unique concept sometimes, but that is my ultimate goal. Some years I don't make any money, some years I do. That comes with the territory as well. The problem, the challenge that we face is that because of the amount of disasters that have gone on, certainly in the US, probably the most publicized, and also around the world, the cost of insurance has absolutely gone up. And, we're in a position now where not only have insurance costs have gone up, but equally the amount of capacity that is available to me for things like flood and things like convective storm has actually come down. But equally, I think that we need to look at where, we're talking about Texas. I've had numerous experiences in Texas where people are building projects, they're building infrastructure, and if the edge of this stage is the end of the floodplain, they're building it to probably where I'm sitting. Now, I'm no data scientist, but I can guarantee you, if you have 10 feet of water there, it's probably going to get to here. So I think there needs to be more due diligence done with that sort of stuff and say, look, let's stop building quite so close to I know the land is cheap.
Right.
I get that, yeah? And therefore developers want to maximize their profits when it comes to building on cheap land. Totally understand that. But there comes a point, going back to the resilience issue, that we need to say stop, yeah? And we need to say, actually, you need to be, X number of feet.
Right, it's
back.
getting everyone to coordinate. I mean, Patty, maybe you want to speak on that. What were your lessons as an insurance commissioner, when you looked down at Texas and you saw what happened? Did you have any thoughts about what you were learning about that from resilience? What are the lessons you take away?
Well, I agree. It's a tragedy, and I think one of the things that I think about it in terms of human life and property, and I think the early warning system. We need to make sure there are early warning systems in place for people. We have, again, I know a lot of the insurance industry relied on NOAA data, and so did emergency management at the state level in order to see when an early warning needed to be given. And sort of the grades are like right now, we have wildfire grades going on. We have 10 wildfires in Washington going on right now. And they're in different, they're scaled differently, so whether or not you need to evacuate or not, is determined by the number that it's given by emergency management. And I think we need to be, and it's not just us, we in the insurance industry, I think regulators in the insurance industry need to be giving more information to consumers on the ground ahead of time. The reason it's 2% for the National Flood Insurance Program is because people think, generally, they think that flood is covered under their homeowner's policy.
Yes,
and
I don't know. That's a good education point. Does everyone here know that your flooding is not covered by your homeowners?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, a lot of people don't, and they just don't think about it. And then so I think it's important to do a lot of community education and outreach. And we've started a program that actually is a continuation of me traveling around the state for 18 months and talking to folks in their communities about their insurance needs. And we call it Community Connect. And it really is about giving people information on how they can mitigate their risks and improve their insurability. But it does take the insurers to give their consumers their wildfire risk score,
right?
Their fire protection score. I think these are important things. Their flood risk score.
Right. So there's a lot of information out there that insurers have. We talk about this all the time that regular people don't have. Yep. But I want to bring the conversation to something else that you just rolled, which is the role of the federal government. We've heard a lot from our current president about how he'd like to get rid of the Federal Emergency Management Agency. He's already made some pretty serious cuts. I don't think people realize just what an enormous role governments play. Insurance covers some of costs afterwards, but governments come in and cover a lot of costs. And when you're going to have a big disaster, you're going to have resiliency partly means being able to build back up. So I'm wondering what you think about his idea that FEMA has gone too far and needs to be cut back. And in a way, we can't afford it forever. So, I mean, I almost see the argument like states have got to take more, and more of it, as you said, has got to go. There's some numbers. More of it's got to go to local communities. Maybe if FEMA cuts back, local communities will be more responsible with building. Patty, I'd love your thoughts on this.
Well, I think it's a really dumb idea to cut back on FEMA. That's it in a nutshell when we're talking about that. What I would say is that I do think local governments are going to be in need of what we're preparing at the Office of the Insurance Commissioner, our pre-disaster toolkits and post-disaster toolkits. We're going to have to be looking at new products, like I said, for local governments to purchase in order to get funds on the ground more quickly after a disaster, because we know the quicker the funds can get into the community that's been hit, the faster the recovery will occur. You're right about builders have to be involved in this too, and developers, and the legislature needs to be looking at building codes. We tried to pass a bill, or I should say, I'm not in there anymore. The legislature tried to pass a bill to have the WUI code, the Wildland Urban Interface building code, as the state building code. That did not pass last year. My office was supportive of that for obvious reasons, because it does say don't build in these other areas. And we're also looking at a wildfire grant mitigation fund. And we're in the middle of the study right now. You can tune in on TVW and watch it. I just came from it, actually, about 2 hours ago. We're looking at what are the recommendations that we can give to communities on how to better prepare to prevent wildfires and create the defensible space for whole communities, because we know you can't just have a home here and a home there. You've got to harden whole communities. So we're being very creative at the Office of the Insurance Commissioner, and partnering with the state agencies and utilities and developers and insurers and homeowners as we move forward in reducing risks so that folks can stay insured.
Michelle, how are you feeling about having the federal government cut back?
I think two things come to mind, and I think the commissioner touched on them. And I think first and foremost, we're at a point in time where we need more collaboration, not less. So it just really worries me about the efforts, the individual efforts that will be made instead of a more coordinated effort. I think it could be a real setback to progress and meaningful change at the time when we probably need it most. So I think and I worry about that is just as how far-reaching, wildfire, for example, can be. It covers a broad geographic region, and then just on the intelligence needed to make good decisions. And so we have hired our own meteorologists on staff, but you would hope that there would be more coordinated effort. Again, if there's 40 electric utilities, do we need 40 meteorologists feeding this information, or should we have a more regional approach where everyone understands? And oh, by the way, my meteorologist is helpful for the communities that we serve energy services to. So let's make better use of our resources at a time that they're stretched so thin trying to tackle this critical moment in time.
Well, since we're running out of time and since I know FEMA isn't your expertise, I'm going to skip you on this, and I'm just going to focus now on the future. And we did get an audience question that goes right into what I was thinking about, which is, so right now, things are much worse than they were 20 years ago, and we didn't prepare for this. As you start thinking about the future, how are you getting either the state, I mean, our audience wants to know how is Washington State budgeting for this, but I would even get you to ask the question of homeowners. How do you get them to start thinking about not just prepping for now, but for 20 years from now? How do you start people thinking about being resilient for disasters, not even that exist today, but are really going to get much worse in 20 years?
Well, we do it by talking about what's happening in Texas and California. And, you know, you can...
Those people, that's our future.
Well, you can say we don't want that future, right? And so here's what needs to happen for us to move in the direction where we don't have to end up like that. And I do think, you know, there's all this talk about it costs a lot to build IBHS standards, and it does. And it costs a lot to have the WUI code implemented at the state level, and it probably does. But you know what costs more? The cleanup after a disaster. That costs a lot more.
She's using some lingo, but these are groups that set standards that we know help you in a wildfire or flood. And she's saying, we know what these standards are, and it costs more to build to them. And that's sort of the problem. I mean, do you want to talk about that from an energy perspective? I mean, what can we do for 20 years out? I mean, these projects need to last that long.
They do. There's a cliche, isn't there, picking up on your point, Patty, you know, in the aviation industry, they say that, you know, that safety is very, very expensive, but a disaster is way more expensive. You know, and it's the sort of same analogy here. In terms of looking to the future, I think that at the end of the day, it's all going to come down, you know, what does it cost when we all go home at night to turn the light switch on? Yeah, because that's what everybody's going to be worried about. So there are lots of new technologies out there that I think require investment and require people like me, candidly, to take a little bit more risk on in order to support those industries. But I think in terms of building resilience for the future, it absolutely is about a more diverse energy mix. And I'm talking not only in the United States, I'm talking globally. So we are seeing new technologies coming to the fold. You know, we are seeing things like hydrogen. We are seeing things like small, medium-scale nuclear and things like that. So there needs to be more investment in a diverse energy mix. There needs to be more collaboration in terms of implementing some of these technologies. And there needs to be a little bit more risk-taking from people like myself, and also from people like large-scale commercial banks who are naturally very, very risk-adverse. So if we can put our heads together and do that and create an energy mix, then when something happens to a particular type of infrastructure, it doesn't mean that, you know, the entire state gets turned off for one reason or another.
And Michelle, how are you thinking about protecting our grid 20 years out?
Yeah, this is absolutely the talking point for my team right now, is just how to transition to this grid of the future. And we've got over $5 billion of investments happening both in the generation and then the long-haul transmission to bring those renewables home to Western Washington. So a lot of work that needs to be done on that part. But then on the distribution system, another $5+ billion to focus on reliability capacity, because we've got new load requirements and large load requirements that we haven't seen before. And then the magic that needs to happen to involve customers in part of the solution making for the grid. So this energy orchestration that needs to happen, this collaboration between utilities and our customers to meet the needs of the future.
Wow. Well, we get one quick question. We've got 1 minute left, so I'm going to let you do. Where do insurance companies fit in the mix on encouraging better construction, better building locations, or incentivizing activities?
Guess that's one for me, is it?
You get it. You get to do it.
Yeah, real quick. I think that where we can encourage it is A, being a little bit more open and transparent.
So the risk scores that Pam was talking about.
We need to. The insurance industry is notoriously bad at sharing data.
Terrible.
Notorious. And I think we need to do a better job of sharing that data so that people can really understand what the key issues are. Until they understand what the key issues are, they're going to carry on behaving like it's all normal, and therefore it's all okay. So I would say more data sharing, more collaboration all around.
Yeah, and I want to thank our panel. I have to say, as someone who covers this, I really believe that insurance is where rubber hits the road on climate change. And the standard line in this world is that you might not believe in climate change, but your insurance company really does.
Yeah.
All right. So thank you, and thank you to our panel. Okay.
Please welcome to the stage Ryan Spies, Managing Director of Sustainability for Alaska Air Group, for a conversation with Bloomberg's Lauren Keel.
Good afternoon, everyone. Ryan, something we have heard repeatedly last night and throughout today is that we actually have a lot of the technologies that we need for decarbonization. And it's more of a question around scaling those, increasing the production of them, increasing adaptation. And I want to start with you and the adoption of them. I want to start with talking with you about sustainable aviation fuel, or SAF. As you all are thinking about SAF at Alaska and Hawaiian Airlines, how are you thinking about how that ties into your sustainability strategy? Where are you on that journey of actually getting that technology and getting it into practice?
Yeah, it's a great question. You know, sustainable aviation fuel is really the lever that we have to pull at any airline for the next 10 to 15 years to decarbonize in a serious way. It's a drop-in fuel that goes into the infrastructure that exists today, operates with our great planes, and is safe and is reliable. The challenge, as you mentioned, is scale. It is a very nascent industry that is a small amount today. Less than 1% of the world's jet fuel is sustainable aviation fuel, but it's multiple times the cost of jet fuel. So we need to see both scale and a reduction in cost to see that happen. And you ask, why is it such a big lever? If you're thinking about how you decarbonize a plane, you know, we had, Ford was up here talking about EVs earlier. EVs are amazing. But if you wanted to throw a battery on a plane and fly from Seattle to JFK, you would be the same weight when you landed. It's very different from a physics standpoint when you're using fuel. You're getting more efficient as you fly. And so until we can, you know, really increase the density, power density of batteries, that solution isn't going to be here for a little while. And as we all know in the climate space, a pound of carbon in the air today is much worse than 10 years from now. So we need solutions today, and that's what we need to scale.
And something you've told me previously is, for this solution to be possible, you need a lot of partnerships. So who are those partners for you?
Yeah, absolutely. As I mentioned, SAF is tremendously expensive. So we need partners from across the sphere. We have great corporate partners, folks like Microsoft here in Seattle, that help us pay down the cost of what we consider that green premium. That price, they're able to claim Scope 3 credits and see reductions on their books. We're able to claim Scope 1 credits. And so we have partners like Microsoft that not only help us buy SAF, but invest in SAF companies. So out here in Western Washington, we're building a plant, or our partners 12 are building a power-to-liquid plant, and Microsoft's our main partner on that. And if you're interested in learning about that sort of years-long partnership to build the next generation of SAF, we're giving out some books in the Alaska and Hawaiian Lounge. Please stop by and get one. It's a really amazing story about how companies can come together where 1 + 1 = 3, and where we have an opportunity to scale new technology. So corporate partners like that, we have others as well. That's the way we pay down this premium and increase the usage of SAF.
But a lot of the people who are on your planes every day are just everyday travelers. Every single one of us travels. A lot of you may have even traveled to get here. So how are you engaging with those everyday travelers around SAF? How do you educate them? I'm also really curious if there's like a certain type of person who engages more with you around SAF, like a demographic, an age group.
Yeah.
Are there any trends you see?
Yeah, it's a great opportunity. In fact, most of our guests are people just like us that fly for travel, for work, for leisure, and they want to see a decarbonization plan as well. And so last year we started integrating within the booking path at alaskaair.com the ability for you to contribute to SAF. And we're not just asking for you to give us your dollars, although that would be great. We also want to reward you for doing that. So we were the first U.S. airline to link it to loyalty. So if you're interested in becoming an MVP and you're a couple, 1,000 miles short, if you help us buy some SAF, we'll help you get to that loyalty level. And that sort of interest we've seen, really grow. It's not 20% of our market. I wish it was. But of the folks that do buy it, the demographics you talked about are really interesting. They weren't what I expected when I looked at our guests that were buying SAF. More than 70% of the folks that buy SAF on our website don't even, reach the threshold to earn EQMs or elite qualifying miles. So they're doing it without getting that reward. They believe in it. Also, that 70 number is really interesting. Folks over 70 are the ones buying SAF and contributing more to this, which I think is really not something that I would have expected. And so we're seeing guests really across the spectrum, and those are different groups, engage on this. But it came to, I was hearing the conversations earlier, right? How do you make a good business plan instead of just saying, oh, we're doing it for the right reasons, right? We have to find that reward. We have to find that lever saying, join us on this journey. We know it's important to you, but it's not going to stop you from flying. And paying down this premium is really critical. I'm sure, how many of you have bought plane tickets without looking at the price, right? It's a tremendously competitive market. And if we're asking you to pay $5 more or $6 more, you might choose a competitor. And so we're trying to find a way to balance that need to progress the industry while also paying down the premium and getting people on board.
It's a really interesting statistic to see who's helping you on that journey and who's uptaking it. I want to ask again in a different way about how you incentivize and the structures around this. You guys are expanding into Europe next year. You're going to be going to Rome. How are you thinking about the totally different regulatory market that you're about to be in? In the U.S., it's much more of a carrot approach. We're used to
it was,
or it's been now it's an approach and not an approach. In Europe, we see much more of like a heavy regulatory environment. There's much more of a stick. So interesting. I see like a little bit of trend here as you're thinking about how you engage with people around it, whether you incentivize them or what that structure looks like. How do you extrapolate that to me as you think about the regulatory space, and how that's going to change as you go abroad?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, on some levels, it makes my job easier because we have to buy SAF when we start flying out of Europe, which is great. But that also means that we have to pass that cost on to a consumer, which is not great. And so you have to balance what the expectation is when you're flying into Europe. Similarly, on the reporting side, I'm sure folks have thought about that are in the corporate sustainability space. Reporting issues in Europe are much tougher, but they also bring clarity to what you're trying to do as a mission as a company. So I also find value in that. And I think what's set there maybe in regulation is de facto here in regulation that's just not on the books, right? You see Fortune 500 companies adhering to European standards because there's clarity of purpose, there's clarity of apples to apples comparison, and we want to be a part of that. So we're thrilled to be flying to Rome next May and 9 new destinations right here out of Seattle. to come after that on an international basis, which is thrilling for us here in Seattle.
You've also recently done a climate scenario analysis.
Yep.
And I'm curious, what have you seen? What risks did you find or insights did you see, especially in communities you serve in places like Hawaii, which are particularly climate vulnerable?
Yeah, I mean, we're a West Coast airline with hubs here. Our biggest hub is in Seattle, and our second biggest hub now is in Honolulu, thanks to Hawaiian Airlines. And we looked at climate data. We modeled out, emission scenarios for the next 30 years to understand how climate is affecting our business. And make no mistake, climate change is affecting our business today. We are seeing more turbulence. We are seeing hotter runways where we have to lighten loads. These are challenges that will not get better very fast. And so we need to be very aware of where those challenges could peak and also how they're going to affect our guests and the communities that we live and work in. I mean, our folks live in the communities that we fly to all across the country. And these are things that affect them every day. So we take that analysis, we try to plan for the future. Yeah, you can move planes if you see a bad storm coming, but you can't move an airport. And you cancel one flight, how many people are upset and how much does that ruin someone's day? So all of those things we have to take into account when planning for these real changes that are happening.
We talked about SAF, but tell me about some of the other things that you all are doing to make flying more sustainable. Are you changing routes? Are you changing the planes, the experience?
Yeah.
What else would people be interested in?
Yeah, for sure. SAF is one of the levers of what we call our 5-part path to decarbonization. Number one is just being more efficient with the gallons that we're using. We're working with our pilots, our ground crews, to use as little fuel as we can in our operations, but that's only going to get you so far. The next big lever is new planes. And we're here in Jet City. We have an amazing partnership with Boeing. Every new plane that they're delivering us is 15 to 25% more efficient than the plane that we're retiring or our older set of planes. And so that makes a huge step change. And we're investing in new technologies and new companies like Jet Zero that have, the blended wing concept. And that may be a 50% increase. And so we're looking and we're placing bets where we can into the future when it comes to efficiency. And then, finally, I would say, we're looking at those technologies too, like battery, like hydrogen. We donated a plane to a company called Zero Abia to hopefully use a hydrogen electric powertrain that can fly that plane. And we're hopeful that will take off in 2027 to see how do we advance other types of technology. So we're trying every lever that we can in a very competitive marketplace, but we know we want to fly. We know everyone in this room wants to go to someplace else to visit family, to do work. And we want to support that journey while also recognizing we have an impact on the earth and we have to be better about it.
If you haven't already, want to encourage you to check out the Alaska and Hawaiian Airlines Lounge that's up here in the front. You can get a copy of this book, Books for Everybody. Also try some of the specialty treats from their planes. Ryan Spies, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you, Lauren.
Thanks.
Please welcome to the stage Benji Backer, CEO and founder of Nature is Nonpartisan, Leslie Davenport, climate psychology consultant, and Rev. Lennox Yearwood, president and CEO of Hip Hop Caucus, for a conversation with Bloomberg's Brian Kahn.
Hi, everyone. I feel like this panel in some ways is like the start of a joke. It's a conservative environmentalist, environmental justice activist, and a climate psychologist walking into a bar. But I guess we're walking into an event here, and I think we have some really diverse viewpoints in this panel. I'm super excited to talk with you about how to make friends of many stripes. And so, Benji, I actually want to start with you. It's a very polarized environment right now around climate and the environment. And yet we saw that the President Donald Trump, signed an executive order recently called Make America Beautiful Again, focused on public lands. I don't think that we necessarily think of this administration as being very friendly to the environment, yet clearly it is in this case, and you have some interesting friends there. So I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about how did you make that happen?
Yeah, well, first of all, good afternoon. It's great to be here. I grew up in a family that was in Wisconsin. They were vegan conservatives in the state of Wisconsin. So if you do the math in your head, it's kind of like this panel. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. But I'd argue that this is what we need more of right here. And so I just want to start out with that. I think our country is really reeling from a partisan and polarization standpoint. I think that's only going to get worse. We're getting in our own echo chambers so much that we can't even think outside the box, and all of our echo chambers are shrinking because we're not willing to think outside of it. And so I think this is a really critical conversation to have right now. I have been critical of the president for most of my life, and that didn't preclude me from trying to make the most out of a situation that we are currently in. And I think what we found is that we took a massive hunting and fishing group, a massive conservation group on the center left, a massive conservation group on the center right, and my new organization, Nature's Nonpartisan, and we said on behalf of millions of Americans, we all want the same things when it comes to clean air, clean water, having a healthier environment, and we were the only ones that were even trying that message at all. And the president listened over the course of many, many months. Of course, there were very tough days, and there were, of course, people working against us. But we were able to get the first pro-environment thing done of this administration, which was, thank you, which was an executive order that was signed a few weeks ago called Make America Beautiful Again. I don't even really want to celebrate that yet, though, because we need to see something get done from it, right? So I totally understand that. But what I will say is that there's a lot of hope for doing so. We helped kill off a 3 million acre sale of public lands that was proposed in the reconciliation bill, and that was killed off not because liberals opposed it, but because liberals and conservatives opposed it. That's why it got killed. If conservatives didn't stand up and oppose that, it would have gotten done, and 3 million acres would have been sold off, no matter how many Democrats were opposed to it. So the future of environmental action has to be across party lines, otherwise we won't get what we want, except for every 4 years when one side gets in office. And so that's the future of the environmental movement that we're building. I'm willing to work with anyone. I'm willing to sit down with anybody, even if I hate them on every single other thing, and try to have a cordial conversation, because this is one of those few issues that should get out of the culture wars. We proved that even Trump could get out of it for one executive order. Let's build on that.
Rev, I see you nodding along, and I'm kind of curious.
I'm thinking about getting one of those, I guess, a MABA hat. MABA, right?
MABA.
Make America.
That's the B in your hat right there, right?
I might not get a MAGA hat, but I might get a MABA hat. I don't know.
I can get you one.
I may or may not take it.
We're already making friends up here.
Just keeping it a buck, you know what I mean?
But Rev, I'm wondering if you can tell me, I mean, I'm guessing your relationship isn't quite the same with this administration as it was with the previous one. And so now you're kind of working from the outside. And I'm wondering if you can tell me a bit about how you're kind of building a coalition that can work to be resilient to both the administration and what it seems to be its real strong pushback and rollbacks of environmental justice and climate goals.
Yeah. I mean, the key thing, and I think actually I really appreciate Benji for what he's doing. We have to do that. I'm, as just Americans, as Earthlings, we have to make sure we do all we can for this planet. And to your point, I don't really care who's in the White House. What I care about is making sure that that humans survive this planet. Mm-hmm. And what I care about is the fact of the matter that we can have situations like we had just last week. We had people who died in floods, children washed away, and we just moving on like nothing happening. L.A. was on fire, moving on like nothing happened. Phoenix and Seattle was on fire. People here in Seattle, homeless, was sticking to the street because the sidewalks were so hot. We moved on like nothing happened. So I don't care. I mean, so for me, I'm just working to stop that. And so the thing to stop that for me is that we got to stop. We got to transition from fossil fuels to clean energy. Step one. Step two, I think for me, I think we got to get beyond petrochemicals, and I think that's the most important thing. There's a fierce urgency of now to stop the expansion of petrochemicals. I know Heather McTeer-Tony is here somewhere in the audience, and you should definitely see her and go to beyondpetrochemicals.org. But I think that's the key thing, because Jane Fonda said it best. The assault, particularly on communities of color, young people, queer communities, poor people, black or white. The fact that we're putting things around them. I'm from Louisiana, if y'all didn't know that. I was born right outside of Cancer Alley. I don't know if you know what Cancer Alley is. Everybody know what see your hands. If you know what Cancer Alley, raise your hands. All right, this is the Bloomberg crowd, so y'all know. Y'all checking it out. But Cancer Alley is 85 miles of land between Baton Rouge and New Orleans, and it has so many petrochemical facilities that are there. And so I just bring that up from the standpoint that those are killing American citizens, and those companies are not American companies. And so we're literally letting foreign companies bringing petrochemicals and plastics into our community. So my whole thing is the fierce urgency of now is that I can't afford to worry about who's in the White House, and I don't have the privilege to wait for the next person to be in the White House when people are dying in Cancer Alley.
And I think, Leslie, I think I heard two things in this, what Rev just said. I mean, one of them is the fact that we have people that all these disasters you named, people moved on. They heard it, they moved on. And then we also have this real urgency of now, this real human side of what's happening with the climate and with the petrochemical industry. So I want to start with the first part of that, though, which is, the idea of people moving on or shutting down, as the case may be. And we're seeing that both in the way that we treat disasters, but also even in things like corporate earnings calls. We've seen a drop in climate across the board. So we have less people talking about this with their neighbors. We have less people talking about it with their shareholders. I'm wondering if you can give us a little sort of insight into how we get people to stop shutting down and maybe instead opening up to talking about this.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we hear the phrase a lot, especially as it relates to the business world, of we can't do business as usual anymore. And my question is how deep can we go with that question, including how we acknowledge to ourselves and each other the fear, the distress, the concern, the thoughts, because even though surveys show that the level of eco-anxiety and related environmental distress is high and on the rise, it's still not talked about. And people do that in isolation. And one of the things that is essential in so many aspects of this is about establishing connection. And I don't even mean just talk about it to your friends, talk about it at the dinner table. I think it has an important role in the workplace. The title of this talk, or the description, was about, how do we get other people on board? How do we convince others? But that right away sets up an us and them, because we've got the answer and we need to make sure that they get on our team. When one of the most overlooked aspects of communication is listening, is opening it up to let me hear what's causing you to hesitate, to turn away. Because unfortunately, given our evolutionary psychology, we are wired to shut down, to turn away, to do some version of business as usual when we start to feel overwhelmed. So it might sound like a soft science, or this is sort of a distraction. I actually think if we could allow that to enter into the conversations, it's going to open things up. It's going to make it easier to be more effective and to move forward and to think outside of the box.
And I'm curious, Spencer, how are you getting, you talked a little bit about how you got the administration to listen to you. How are you getting others who may not necessarily think like conservative, climate, yes, how are you getting folks to kind of listen to this outside of the conservative space as well?
Well, it is all about language, and let me just tell you, I wrote a book called The Conservative Environmentalist, and the biggest piece of advice I would give to anybody is don't title your book The Conservative Environmentalist, because environmentalists hate it and conservatives hate it because they hate the other word. But it's my publisher loved that. But it's a really good case study as to why the communication and the words matter, and that goes to listening. I used to believe that climate deniers were like these evil people who didn't have the same worldview as I did and hated the planet. And when I realized that there's actually, there's people perpetuating climate denial, but there's also the people believing it. The people believing it are really amazing people who go to work every day, just try to feed their families and go on with their lives, and they don't feel like they're represented in the conversation. That's really at the core of why they feel like it's not real. They're worried about the solutions. They're worried about it harming their communities. They're worried about having their jobs taken away. And if you don't listen to that, then you wouldn't know that. And so I think what the climate movement has completely failed at is figuring out how to reach the other 60 to 70% of America that doesn't think about climate change every day in the way that this room maybe thinks about climate change, the way that I think about climate change. And of course I think it's an existential threat. Of course I have, I want net zero goals. Of course I want all that stuff, but that doesn't resonate with everybody. I mean, I grew up in Wisconsin. My high school was across the street from a dairy farm. If you're a dairy farmer, you're not thinking about sea level rise, right? You're thinking about trying to make sure that your crops are healthy and that your agricultural fields are healthy. And so that's a very different conversation. And when you don't have that understanding and you haven't listened, it's easy to shut those walls up. And, people are always like, well, I've saw my crazy conservative uncle at Thanksgiving, and he was saying that climate change wasn't real. It's like, well, ask him why he doesn't think climate change is real. Ask him what he's fearful of. Try to get to the bottom of it so that you can understand that there's always a reason behind it, and it's not because they're funded by big oil. It's your uncle. So, so I think that we've villainized this huge part of the population that just is not on the same page as us, but that doesn't mean they don't care, and that doesn't mean they don't have some of the same motives. Some of the biggest I was at an event, last thing I'll say on this is, I was at an event at CU Boulder. There's a climate denier in the audience. She got really upset at me for caring about climate change, and she's like, well, I just don't get it because I love hiking and I love skiing and I love being outdoors and I just don't believe in climate change. And I'm like, okay, well, this person I can work with, because they actually have the same end goal. They want to protect the environment, but they feel like the climate change conversation has come at a direct threat to their political beliefs or something else. And she and I ended up having a great conversation and came to the same conclusion after I understood why she didn't believe climate change was real. So it goes to what you were talking about. It's totally a listening thing, and we preach too much. We don't listen enough.
That's right. And let me just add, I think it's really useful to even lift off the term climate change because it makes more room for ways people can come together, whether it's clean air, the cleaning up the environment, whatever it may be.
Right.
Can I add a but to that, though?
Yeah, please.
I mean, I get that, and we all gonna leave the stage and go back and be friends in the green room. So I want nobody to take what I'm going to say like it's not that way, because we are going to do that. But there's a but, and there is sometimes a right or wrong. And there are things that with fossil fuels is killing us. And so it'd be very equivalent to somebody, my ancestors going through slavery. And but the people in the big house are really nice people. They okay. I'm out there on the plantation. I'm like, man, I want to go to this plantation. That's real. I don't want to be here. And so I don't want to hear that I'm a slave. I don't want to hear my freedom is not available. I don't want to hear I can't marry who I want to marry if I'm queer. I don't want to hear if I'm a woman or I'm non-binary. I can't have the rights. There's some things that are going to be right and wrong. And fossil fuels is wrong. And it's causing us to be on a direct pathway. If someone's business plan is a death sentence for our communities, that's wrong. And so we got to stand up. Now, we can be friends. I got uncles, too, who I sit around with. You know what I mean? And we can debate it. And they're good. I bet you, they're good people. They're not saying that. But then this is where narrative comes in. I was so glad that Lindsay and Anna Jane and Jordan from Good Energy had their conversation yesterday, because what we're losing on is narrative. I've always said that, yes, we're in a climate crisis. But the problem with the movement is that we are also in a crisis of imagination. And so how do we figure that out? How do we tell the story so that crazy uncle who is right, wants a good job, but doesn't understand that your job is killing you? That lump on your chest? That now we praying for you, Unc, because you got a lump on your chest, Unc, and you peeing blood, Unc? No, that's not a good job, Unc, when you pee in blood. So that's why I'm so glad that with Beyond Petrochemicals, when that campaign first started, man, we have so far killed 26 projects. That equates to 40 billion tons of carbon emissions. And it stops the toxins in the air, which means that even in Cancer Alley, I get phone calls every day from people who are dying. I got a phone call yesterday from somebody whose dog died because of cancer. When people's dogs are dying, dogs are literally having lumps on their bodies, and they're dying. You petting your dog, and it's a lump that's growing because we don't want to transition, then that's wrong. And so I'm just saying here that we got children being stripped away. We got dogs with cancer. Then I'm sorry. I'm sorry, because I'm hoping that this Bloomberg recording will get out 100 years from now, and they'd be like, man, there was a guy on that stage with a funny-looking jacket, and he was up there talking and yelling and screaming, and they're going to be like, I don't know what he was talking about, but for some reason that panel up there and the people in the audience did something, and we still have clean air and clean water in Seattle.
Yes.
That's important to me.
Leslie, I feel like, I mean, we're talking about the importance of narrative. I mean, this is a narrative, isn't it? And I'm curious, I mean, how do you, I mean, this is a very personal narrative, but for folks in this audience, how do they share their narratives, their experience with climate change? Because this is a very, I mean, very serious and extreme examples we've all experienced at some point in our lives. And so how can people go about sharing those narratives to engage others around them to also act?
Well, I'll just add, Bell Hooks said it best. The rage of the oppressed is not the same as the rage of the privileged. And so our stories are going to look different. And so I think the first thing in that is to realize that sometimes we have been telling our stories to we need data and research, and we definitely I'm a fan, and it's such an important piece to just put forth good stories. But on top of that, I think that we have given our lens of storytelling through what I would call a very white paper energy. Some of y'all ain't get that joke, but some of y'all may get it later on. And in the lens of that, I think that we're telling a story thinking that we're going to out-convince people about certain things and not having the compassion or love. And we got to tell stories. Honestly, y'all, we got to tell stories that are flawed. I also work along with Netflix. And one of the things at Netflix is that they say that a lot of climate stories aren't that good because all of our characters are like perfect characters. Like they have no flaws to them. And so they just like, people can't really just do what Betty was saying. They can't connect. But the problem there with that is this. Let's actually just be human to them. Let's have the scientists who's solving the climate crisis who's also an addict. Let's have, when I had to go through Hurricane Katrina, but during Hurricane Katrina, even with the floods rising, people did two things. They figured out how to make, with no power and water rising, they figured out how to make gumbo, and they figured out how to make love. I don't know how they did either one of them, but they figured out how to do it. But tell that story. Yeah. Tell stories of narrative, and I think that's it. And then also just make sure that that America, one thing, the climate movement doesn't own climate change as an issue. It's about humanity. So that's the first thing. Don't stop acting like you own this issue. And the second thing, this is an international issue. So for instance, like I know we have COP30 coming up, but we also have COP31. The INC 5.2 is coming up with regards to the plastic treaty, which then leads to COP31 in Australia. Let's make sure that we are living beyond that. But I just want to say this, make sure we're telling stories. And I hope that if there are folks who are watching this who are in Texas or Illinois or far in LA or my folks in New Orleans, I hope that the death of whoever you lost, I pray that we can not only tell good stories, but we can hold the camera while crying. And we can hold that camera while crying to ensure those stories get out.
Mm-hmm. You know, in a lot of ways, you described, I'm thinking about yesterday's talk with Jane Fonda, and we did a poll, a live poll, and folks said the stories they most wanted to hear were stories that were about human stories with climate in the background, not necessarily the foreground. And I think that's in a lot of ways what we're hearing here as well.
I do just want to push back a little bit, and again, we are going to hug after this, so that's going to work. But I've spent a lot of the last few years going to these communities in these traditional energy communities, and the problem with what you're saying with reaching those people, which they are critical to getting things done, and of course there's a certain percentage that's not never going to listen to us, and we can't really communicate, but there's a huge percentage that can. They don't think their job's killing people, and they don't think it's killing themselves. They believe it's powering people and powering communities. I mean, 80% of the world is reliant on fossil fuels to survive. It's not just about killing people. It's about powering people's lives. I mean, I spent a whole week in Midland, Texas. I don't think anyone dreams of spending a week in Midland, Texas. But I have a newfound appreciation for the people there because I went there and I understood why they do what they do. They are so proud to feel like they're powering the world with energy so people can have cost-effective energy to live their lives. They don't think that they're killing people. And so if you go to them with that message, you have completely alienated them. They are completely gone. And I'm sorry, but that's the problem. That message is the problem because it pits people into a corner. Yeah. And we are in our corners way too often. The belief for climate change is going down right now.
That's right.
It's going down. And we've tried everything to shame people and blame people and put them in their place and tell them that they're doing things wrong and that they're killing everybody. But if we keep telling them that, then we are going to kill everybody.
Yeah.
So we got to figure this out. And we're not going to do it by blaming people who are just trying to wake up and make ends meet every day, especially when a lot of those people have the same connection to nature and the environment that we all share here. I hike and I ski and I love the environment just as much as anybody else. But so does somebody who works in an oil field. They are often avid outdoorsmen, and they love spending time in the outdoors. The Cabela's shopper and the REI shopper want the same things. They want clean air, and they want clean water, and they want to be able to recreate outdoors. So until we figure out how to get on the same page, we will continue to lose. And as we've been talking about on stage here today, we cannot afford to lose anymore. We need to build a winning coalition of people across the political spectrum, or we will never create the solutions that we need. The environment deserves more than these boxes that we put ourselves in, and we've got to figure out how to communicate better.
And I just want to say, I hear you. And no, definitely, give it up. I hear that. That's important. I think the key thing there is keeping it real with whoever it is. I think it's not about shaming, but about letting somebody. I want to know if I'm on a job that's causing me to and sometimes we make a decision. Let's be clear. I work at a place to make a decision on that. But I just want to say that it's not about shaming, because the goal here for me, how do we change Cancer Alley to Solutions Alley?
Right.
How do we get rid of the companies that are hurting and actually move to companies that are actually helping? So I'm with you. If it's about that. But I just also want to make sure, because we talked about this backstage. I remember going to East Palestine, Ohio, right? I remember going to East Palestine, Ohio, and I actually told the last administration they need to show up there, and they didn't show up because the idea, again, the climate movement was that environmental justice was a black, brown, or indigenous issue, and it wasn't a conservative white issue. Right. So I went there, right? I went there, me and Aaron Brockovich went to East Palestine, Ohio. And I went there because I had gone through the pain of Katrina. And I had gone through other pains of folks doing petrochemicals in Cancer Alley. And I will tell you, when I got there, people had on, actually, they didn't have on MAGA hats, they had on MAGA hats and MAGA t-shirts. But they had gone through a tragedy. And I will tell you, they came and they heard and they saw me. And I have never been hugged by so many white people in my life who was just wanted to be human and to connect, and they wanted to, and they themselves have felt forgotten by both parties. And so I'm with you. I think what we have now is a real conversation about where do we go as a movement. And so I agree. We are not here to shame nobody. We're not here to throw them under the bus. But there is a situation where we got to be real, and we got to have real solutions to help us transition from fossil fuels to clean energy.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I want this conversation to keep going. I think we have to, unfortunately, give it the stage to the next folks. But thank you all for being here. And I think let's go hug it out backstage.
Hug it backstage.
Thank you, everybody.
Please welcome to the stage Shannon Braddock, King County Executive, and Jessyn Farrell, Deputy Mayor of the City of Seattle, for a conversation with Bloomberg's Anna Edgerton.
Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all of you. We've heard a lot of discussion today about how the U.S. federal government is pulling back. So I'm very excited to talk to you about local resilience, disaster preparation, and response to give us a little bit of a bright spot. So Shannon, if I could start with you, what does this look like for King County, both in fiscal and practical terms, when you have the federal government pulling back and a local jurisdiction trying to respond to that?
Thanks, Anna. Well, first of all, it's great to be here, and I'm really happy to see all of you here today. For King County, King County and Seattle, we're leaders in this climate work and in climate action, and in particular climate justice. I was so happy to see Paulina Lopez on the agenda earlier. And the federal government, last year we were able to do a 4-county collaboration and lead a grant application, and were awarded $50 million from the Biden administration to do work to decarbonize buildings across the 4 counties, particularly focused on low and moderate incomes and people who live in areas most impacted by climate impacts from airports, for example, things like that. So that kind of work is incredibly important. We know it's incredibly important. Right now, we're able to do that work. We have that money coming in, but we need more of that, not less of that. And we certainly are getting the impression from this administration we should expect less of that and not more. But what I would also stress is Seattle and King County are amazing partners. We know how to collaborate with each other and with the other 38 cities in the county and across the entire region. So I think we see opportunity to really build those partnerships. We have the King County Cities Climate Collaboration. It's called K4C. 87% of our cities participate in that. And I think we want to get that up to 100, right? And so there's work to do, but I think we see opportunity. We are a real leader in that space. We need to continue to be a leader in that space as a local government, and we're going to keep doing that.
And I should also say, if the audience has questions, you can scan a QR code somewhere to submit questions, and I'll try to get some of those in as well. Jessyn, you previously led Seattle's Office of Sustainability and the Environment. So I thought you might be a good person to talk about how local jurisdictions are better positioned for certain climate initiatives. Can you tell us a little bit about transportation and building codes and the things that local jurisdictions can actually do better than the federal government?
Okay, great. Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's so great to be here. I think a couple of things that are really important. I've been working on environmental issues for 20 years, and for most of that time, the federal government has not been a huge player. And so we had this brief, wonderful moment for 3 years while we had access to the federal government as a partner. And we want that, and it was great because the feds can scale in a way that local jurisdictions in the state just can't. But at the end of the day, that's mostly what we've been working with. The feds have not been huge partners. And cities actually have the ability to do a ton of decarbonization in our land use and in transportation. There's a ton of carbon that's baked into our land use and transportation policies. And so we're really well positioned to decarbonize on the one hand and at the same time make cities an even better place to live. So I can talk a little bit about our building emissions performance standard. BEPS is the very sweet little name that we call that regulation. But that's an example where we were actually able, I like to say we got both DSAs in our community to generally get into the same neighborhood on a policy. So the Downtown Seattle Association and the Democratic Socialists usually are not in the same room talking to each other. And we were really able to get people into a general place of consensus. I don't want to say that we resolved every issue and that everyone was a cheerleader, but ultimately, by really focusing on the tangible benefits that these policies bring to people in our community, you get more comfortable buildings. So when it's hot like this, you can be in an air-conditioned and air-cooled space. If you are a union member, you get access to a great-paying job. And we created the policy in a way that people with big asset portfolios had lots of time, have lots of time to be able to implement and pivot. It's a 25-year program. So that is an example where at the local level, I really think we're doing it right and bringing people together through climate policy.
That's so funny. When you said the two DSAs, I knew exactly what you were talking about. I think it's important to have policies that also have a business case, that provide those incentives. It's not just about doing good, but it's also about doing well. And, providing that incentive for people at the local level. Shannon, we've talked about resilience, but I also want to talk about disaster response. Here in King County, late last year, we had the bomb cyclone, which was basically like a big thunderstorm, but it was hugely destructive. Homes were destroyed. We didn't have power for 4 days. What has the back and forth been like with the Trump administration that's different than how it usually works?
Well, our Office of Emergency Management they've applied for disaster funding from the federal government and been denied twice. The storm was about $34 million in damage, which by natural disaster standards is relatively small. But when you think about it from that community space, it's huge. And for local governments, it's a large amount of money, right? So then you look at larger natural disasters and you understand why it's so important for the federal government to be engaged, at the very least, at a resourcing level. We can work together. We have arrangements with partner counties, partner cities. We all work together, and there are arrangements made for if there's a natural disaster. We will, of course, collaborate in those spaces. But I think the other thing we're really trying to work to do is how do we prevent those natural disasters from happening? And so we are working on our wildfire action plan, our climate director for another thing, I really need to give credit to my predecessor, Dow Constantine, who was in this role for 16 years and was an incredible climate champion, and created a climate office inside the executive's office so that it could really oversee all of this work across the enterprise. And our climate office director was a part of the Blue Ribbon Commission in LA and is bringing, after their wildfire disaster, is bringing those lessons here so we can learn from that. We also, we have zoning things in place so that we are creating the appropriate kind of zoning out in our more rural areas so that we are creating wildfire protection spaces and working to try to prevent some of those kinds of things. Again, it's all, it's big bodies of work, but we know we've got the skills and resources.
That's so interesting because I remember, watching the fires in LA and thinking about what that would look like here in Washington State and King County. And unfortunately, it's a matter of when, not if.
That's right.
So that preparation and, kind of learning best practices from where it's already happened. So important. I believe we actually have a chart of disaster aid as percent of county GDP, if we could pull that up, so we can kind of illustrate this. We've seen several events in the past few months. Floods from Hurricane Helene in my home state of North Carolina, the fires in LA, these tragic floods in Texas, which of course we're, sending all of our solidarity and support to the communities there. Shannon, I was going to ask you about how do you plan for the unthinkable, but there were a lot of people in these places who were thinking about the worst case scenarios. And how do you, what do you take from specifically the Texas floods? Do you see any similar vulnerabilities here in King County?
I mean, honestly, in that case, I don't see a lot because we wouldn't permit in that kind of a flood zone. That's the kind of, we have really strong permitting and protections in our conservation spaces, in our easement spaces. Now, we have places like Vashon Maury Island, like South Park, we have sea rise concerns. We're not, immune to those things, but we are very on the lookout for those kinds of things and trying
South
to
Park, where Paulina
those.
Lopez, the community she's talking about.
Yes, so we're not immune to that, but we do try to make sure we hold very strongly. There's a lot of tension in that space, right? Like, as you well know, growth management is a very challenging thing. People want to build cheaper housing. To do that, you would have to get outside of a growth boundary and out of the urban growth boundary. That causes some other challenges and issues. And we really hold strong to protecting those areas because we know what that environmental protection means to protecting our climate and protecting those kind of disasters from happening.
And for protecting people. We have a poll. Y'all are good at polls by this point. Asking what kind of local investment would most improve climate resilience in your community. So if you can scan the code and vote on the poll. Jessyn, while they're doing that, I wanted to ask you about exactly this, this stricter permitting in this area and the tension that brings with the need for more housing. We have very high housing costs here. How do you balance the need to just build with stricter rules about how and where to build?
Yeah, I think, backing up, part of the case for cities is that they need to be great places for everybody to live, people who currently live there and people who want to live there. And the housing affordability crisis really makes that a challenge. I would say the other part of this is dense cities are more climate resilient cities. People who live in dense communities have a lower per capita carbon emissions, et cetera. At the same time, one of the big debates in Seattle is housing versus trees. So not only do we need more housing, but we need to protect our existing canopy and grow the next generation's canopy as well. So how the heck do you do that? On the permitting front, everyone talks about the abundance book. There's a lot to that, I will say. It had to come up. We're talking local government. It had to come up.
Yeah, go for it.
So, permitting-wise, yes, we need to do it faster. We need to be more transparent. It needs to be a lot simpler. And I will say I am, pro-progressive government, believe in regulation, and our regulations can absolutely get in the way of what we're trying to do. And so the mayor of Seattle has issued an executive order that is really directing us to go through our regulations with a fine-tooth comb and do this better and do permitting better. So that's one side of it. On the density versus tree side, I think the real way we unlock that ability to build more housing, protect trees, at the end of the day is going to be about flexibility on the lot. We have a lot of requirements on a particular lot. You need parking, you need places to store trash. You can only have, setback, all of these different things. And what happens is the trees end up getting cut down because all of these other things get the priority over a tree. So if you can create flexibility for developers on a particular lot, if you save a tree, you get flexibility. I think that's how we get to that place where we're able to have more density and save those big existing trees that we want and need in a climate resilient community.
And not build into more sensitive areas.
Yeah. And we've done urban heat mapping with the city of Seattle so that we can also understand where more trees are needed. And King County has a 3 million trees project to plant 3 million trees by the end of next year, and we are on track to do that. And so working with the city of Seattle, it helps us determine, where to put a bus shelter, how to make sure we're protecting trees that might be in those spaces. So we're working on that to try to be sure we can be a part of that, helping those dense urban areas maintain or build some of that tree canopy.
That's great. We do have an audience question about green streets and active transportation. Jessyn, I think this might be one that you can take.
Okay.
Tell us all about transportation and also how that fits into kind of the climate matrix and some things we talked about.
Okay, great question. Most of you know that, maybe some of you, maybe you don't know. I will tell you, transit is my love language. And so it's great to get to talk about that for a sec.
I love nerds. I love hanging out with them.
Yeah, I know. So nerdy. This is what everybody wants at 3:30 in the afternoon. So, I think the real issue for city streets is how do we make them work for people, right? Like at the end of the day, how do we make sure that we have low carbon options? They're safe for our kids. They're safe for elders. Some of us are going to drive. I have 3 kids. I definitely use my car to get my kids around. But at the end of the day, a really great, workable, dense city has really great options to get around. And the other thing I would say about this is with transportation being the #1 cause of emissions in the city of Seattle, with the feds pulling back from EV incentives, go get your EV incentive right now. Don't wait, run, don't walk. Is that we actually know how to reduce emissions from transportation right now. And that is to get out of our cars and use other ways of getting around. And I look at some people say, but it's too hard, people don't want to change. I'm going to use an example that is one of my favorite examples. University of Washington in the early 90s had 70% of people drive alone onto that campus. And a group of folks, a group of transportation planners, including my first boyfriend's dad, Mr. Davis, was part of that group that created the UPass program. And the UPass program basically said you'll get a free bus pass or a heavily subsidized bus pass. We're going to jack up parking pricing, and we're going to make transit amazing from all around the region. And within a couple of years, that mode shift flipped so that you had only 30% of people driving and 70% of people taking transit. And you can only imagine what amazing benefit that had for emissions. So it's just to say we actually know how to do this, and we have the tools, and it makes a better city when we're creative and figure out these new things. So that's kind of my throwdown to everyone at the City of Seattle, at King County, and in this room. What is the next generation of UPass policies that help incentivize people make a change? Go get your EV at the same time, but let's also get out of our cars.
And there's some things we can do as individuals, but then there's also things that happen at a systemic level that allow us to make decisions as individuals that are better for the climate. having those transit options, having those, the housing options is definitely part of that. Thank you both so much. It's been such a pleasure. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
When the National Seashore was established in the early 1960s, it was a great experiment that contemplated the continuation of agricultural use in Point Reyes. Congress recognized that preservation the ranchers had done over the last century was important. So they saw no reason to remove the ranches. And that was an agreement made between Congress and the landowners that they could continue their way of life. For about the last 2 decades, there has been pressure to undo that agreement. We're a small agrarian-based community, and this idea to remove agriculture from Point Reyes, it kind of pulls us apart. And the people that are driving this are so far removed they don't even know where we are.
That was a clip from Leaving Point by Michael Farrell, one of the films featured in tomorrow's Green Docs Film Festival. The film examines looming ranch closures in Point Reyes National Seashore in Northern California and how a tight-knit community confronts sweeping changes and the disappearance of a way of life passed down through generations. We hope you'll join us at the Seattle Art Museum at 2 p.m. to watch this film and many more. Speaking of the connection of community and Congress, our next speaker is one of our Bloomberg Green's ones to watch and is joining us virtually from Washington, D.C., where Congress is currently in session. Please join me in welcoming our next guest, House Representative Yassamin Ansari of Arizona's 3rd Congressional District, for a conversation with Bloomberg's Zara Hirji.
Hello. Well, thank you everyone for coming, and thank you to the congressman who's, calling to us from Washington, D.C. Really appreciate you taking this time, and it's great to speak to you again. A little bit of an intro for the folks, if you have not read the ones to watch bio. One of the reasons why we have this congresswoman is because she has one of the best kind of climate credentials in Congress. So she's new to Congress this year, but she's coming in with an actual rich history. She has worked for the UN. She was part of a team that helped put together the Paris Climate Agreement. And then when she was most recently Phoenix, working in the city council and different roles there, was working on extreme heat. So she knows this stuff in her bones. And now, of course, she's in Congress, where at the federal level, and we're here to talk about climate action. And maybe I wanted to start very big picture, which is what we're seeing the federal government do is actually not action, but inaction or rolling back action. And so, is climate action right now at the federal level even possible?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you, Zara. I really, really appreciate it. It was such an honor to be included on the Bloomberg Ones to Watch list. As you mentioned, I've worked on climate policy throughout my entire career, and it's really what drove me to run for public office in the first place. Look, I can't sugarcoat it. We're in a very, very difficult period at the federal level when it comes to climate action. I think some of the legislation in recent weeks, especially the Trump budget bill, it represents some of the worst environmental rollbacks that we've ever seen. There's, of course, been pauses on things like the bipartisan infrastructure bill and the Inflation Reduction Act. There's, sales of public lands, massive giveaways to the oil and gas industry, cuts to the clean energy tax credits. It's really, really devastating for sure. I think the other issue that I'm really concerned about federally is FEMA and the direction that FEMA is headed in. We have seen just over the last week, the Secretary Kristi Noem demonstrate significant incompetence when it comes to managing FEMA and disasters like the horrific floods that we've seen in Texas. And when it comes to issues specific to Arizona, as it pertains to climate change, we really need FEMA to actually declare extreme heat as a natural disaster. It kills more people each year than flooding, hurricanes, etc. combined, but it's a silent killer. And so I'm very concerned that not only are we not strengthening FEMA to be ready to deal with the natural disasters presented to us by the climate crisis, but in fact, they are, this administration is really committed to forcing it back. So something I'm thinking a lot about, during Trump 1.0, I was a big part of a lot of the non-state climate action work that took place in the U.S. And across the world. We saw cities and states, tribes, companies step up like never before through, coalitions, through Bloomberg, through We Are Still In, mayors, C40, the governors, etc. We need to see that, again and fourfold, fivefold, to deal with the challenges of this time. I think from my vantage point here, I'm really trying to mitigate harm at the federal level and really make the case for continuation of critical funding to our states and our cities. But I would be lying if I said I wasn't very concerned about the lack of federal action. It's really going to make it so that non-state actors will have to step up more. But this time, the challenge is that you have a very hostile administration that is really going after entities as well for anything that they deem Green New Deal-esque, which is obviously climate action.
So there are a couple things I want to kind of come back to, including the upcoming budget bill that I know is under discussion. But before that, I was hoping you could take a minute, since we did just recently have the big, beautiful bill pass a couple weeks ago, and it was something that you didn't vote for. I believe none of the Democrats in the House of Representatives voted for. And so if you could sort of take a minute to talk about what can you do as being part of this minority party to bring accountability. Like, what are the actions that you have right now? Where do you see it makes sense to spend your time and, to bring change when, say, legislation is passing and you're not voting for it and it's still kind of coming to be?
Well, it's absolutely, a very tough position and not an ideal position, but I think there's a couple things. So one route that I'm taking is through some of the committee assignments that I have. I'm currently the ranking member, which means I'm the top Democrat of the subcommittee on energy and mineral resources. So this is the committee that oversees, policies related to energy, of course, and most, if not all, of the hearings that we have had so far, as decided by the Republican Party, have been about quote unquote unleashing American energy dominance, but it's predominantly focused on the oil and gas sector and also mining. And so I have used every hearing opportunity to really draw attention to the issue of corruption as it relates to the oil and gas sector, as it relates to contributions that were made to the president and now the payoffs that are being handed over to the industry through giveaways. And I think that's really, really important. I think this climate populism message is one that we really need to lean into, because like everything else, when it comes to the cost of living, there is a clear connection between your utility prices and your energy costs. In Arizona, your AC bills being higher than ever. There's a clear connection when we are entirely focusing our energy portfolio on oil and gas. That's what Republicans are doing right now. They completely want to get rid of solar and wind and renewable energy and only focus on one, which is a mistake when you're talking about energy costs. So I think that message and using the platform to make that very clear to people is important, especially as most Americans right now are hyper concerned, and rightly so, with the cost of living.
Yeah, so on some of those points, last night we had, for people who are in the room, who were maybe here, we had actress Jane Fonda. And one of her big points was that people don't actually know what was in the bill that just passed and how it's sort of tied to some of these things, whether it's related to electricity costs and clean energy and fossil fuels. So can you just very quickly kind of highlight someone who knows this stuff? Like, what do people need to know about what was in that bill? And then we can talk, next about, okay, what do we need to pay attention in the budget bill, which hasn't passed yet. And so, discussion is still very much live.
Well, so this bill that Trump signed into law is the budget. There's rescissions packages, and Republicans still want to do more reconciliation packages, but it was signed into law. And I actually held a 16-hour reading of the bill because we were also trying to expose the fact that Republicans released this 1,000-page bill in the middle of the night, which obviously meant that nobody had been able to read it in time for voting for it. But, the main things that you'll hear about, of course, are the Medicaid cuts, 17 million people getting thrown off of health insurance, largest cut to food assistance in American history, massive rollbacks of the clean energy tax credits. And this is really concerning. And I have heard from very conservative Arizonans about this, from conservative labor leaders, who represent electricians, building trades, et cetera, who were so excited and truly benefiting from the infrastructure bill and the Inflation Reduction Act in terms of the jobs. And said very clearly to me that voting for this bill would be a massive job killer in Arizona. And that is extremely unfortunate, and something that they didn't understand why the conservative members would vote for such a thing. Similarly, the utility companies in Arizona that, for many years received a lot of flack about their raising of energy costs, but they've made very robust and ambitious carbon reduction commitments. Both APS and SRP are fully have commitments in line with the Paris Agreement, 2050, full phase out of coal by 2030, but they rely on these tax credits and these incentives to be able to reach those goals. And so those are the pieces related to climate that I think are most concerning. And then I just do want to emphasize that it's also a significant funding increase for Department of Homeland Security and ICE in the tune of about $170 billion, which means that the detention and deportation capacity is going to about quadruple.
So we've talked a lot about what's happened. I want to kind of pivot to the future. And so where do we go here when it comes to climate action? I'm thinking both, right now, next couple of months, what you can do, but I'm also thinking a little bit more down the road. What can Democrats as a party do if they're the party that's been leading on climate action and they don't have control of the chambers right now? Let's say they, in a scenario, do take control of Congress in the midterms. Then what are the steps that they can do to kind of claw back on climate change? What do you see the priorities and what's even possible?
Mm-hmm. I think short term, the most important thing federally will be to mitigate the harm and continue to push back as much as possible and show the harmful impacts on energy costs to the American people, and try to work with some of the more moderate Republicans to try to push some of them back. I bring this up only because the vote has already passed, but right now, for example, in the Senate, we're seeing Senator Hawley, who was one of the people who was against the Medicaid cuts. He voted for the bill, and now he's introducing a new bill to not cut Medicaid. And it's absurd, but I think similar avenues could be explored when it comes to the clean energy piece of things, because there are Republicans who were vocally against those, but still voted nonetheless. Again, I think local, state, corporate action is going to be vital. It's really, I'm really hoping that the private sector in particular doesn't succumb to fear from this administration and continues and charts, moves forward. I talked to folks from GM yesterday, for example, and they made very clear they will continue with all of the progress they were making on their electrification and continue to invest heavily there, and nothing's changing. So that's great news. And then elections are key. I can't emphasize that enough. 2026, winning back the House is going to be really important. And now is a really important time for Democrats to plan when it comes to what is the legislation that we want to push forward when we have the House, and again, when we have the trifecta. I'm going to be leading, I think different caucuses are working on different things, but within the Progressive Caucus, I'm going to be leading a lowering costs task force where we're really going to hone in and listen to ideas and put forward the bold policies that we want to push for in 2026, 2028, and beyond. And I really want to roll in climate from the energy perspective here, because again, I think there's a strong affordability case that needs to be made. I heard on the previous interview, housing as well. There's a strong housing link to climate, and I think, continuing to innovate on the communications of it all too, right? Like, as far as I've been doing this work, just in the last decade, I've seen the communications on climate change shift and advance with the times, and I think we have to be cognizant there as well.
Yeah, I want to go back to what you just mentioned about this effort to maybe introduce a new bill on Medicaid. I don't want to talk about that, but this idea that it sounds like you're saying there might still be opportunities to work across the aisle on some of these things like clean energy. Can you talk about that a little bit more? Like, where you're seeing the opportunities maybe to work with Republicans, because right now, obviously, they've been voting for this. They've been passing this, and yet it seems like you're getting the sense that there might be some wiggle room there.
So I'm an optimist by nature. And I think that when you are in such an unpredictable environment, unpredictable opportunities will come about as well. And we're 6 months in, we're seeing immense damage from this administration. And I think that the impacts are going to start really having ripple effects across our economy and our society. And there will be a need by some Republicans to show more good faith in working on things that matter to people. I think my focus will be Arizona. I think if, we start seeing impacts of job losses and angry constituents in these districts that we're going to really benefit from these clean energy jobs, I think that is an opening to work with folks from across the aisle. I'm planning to attend the COP this year in Brazil with a big delegation as well of members of Congress and some senators as well. And we'll be looking for opportunities there too, to work with private sector to really engage and also show our international partners that while we may not have federal, government support in the White House, there is still a massive contingent within the United States House of Representatives that takes this issue seriously and will be back in 2026 with real plans.
Well, I feel like that's a perfect, hopeful, optimistic note to end on. I really want to thank you for taking your time. Can we give a round of applause?
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thanks, everyone.
All right. I urge you to stick around because I have something special that's coming. But that is the end of our show. Thank you to our sponsors, Amazon, our title sponsor, Amazon, and our official airline, Alaska and Hawaiian Airlines. We do also have a couple of breakouts that are coming after this. We have the debrief with the Bloomberg Green team, which is in the Cove breakout room. And we also have accelerating AI infrastructure in the Marina breakout room. There's also going to be a networking reception up on the roof, which is, I've been told, has an amazing view, so you can stick around for that. And just another reminder to stick around for our Bloomberg Green Docs Film Fest tomorrow at 2 p.m., which will be at the Seattle Art Museum. And one other quick thing that I wanted to mention, we have our slate of events that are coming up for the rest of this year. Our Summer of Sustainability continues. We've got SBS Singapore coming up July 30th. We will be in New York for Green New York September 25th during UNGA. And then we'll also be at COP, hopefully with the Congresswoman, November 4th in Sao Paulo. So now, as I said, we have a special treat to close us out. Please join me in welcoming actress, Grammy-nominated singer, writer, CEO, and co-founder of Climate Revival, Antonique Smith, for a very special performance.
Thank you so much, Meg. And thank you, Bloomberg Green Fest, for having me. So happy to be able to put a musical exclamation point on everything we've heard the last 2 days. The song I'm going to sing is the theme song of a very new and exciting day called Sunday. Sunday is September 21st. It was founded by Bill McKibben, the great Bill McKibben, and it is a day to celebrate the beautiful sun that warms us, that powers us, and we're going to celebrate all the clean energy solutions, and most importantly, solar. It's cheaper, it's healthier, it's going to create more jobs, and it's hopeful in a time where it's just so chaotic and everybody's in so much fear, rightfully so, in so much fear. More people are dying from pollution that's causing climate change. More people are dying from the unnatural disasters that are being caused by climate change. People need hope. People need joy. People need to feel love. And Sunday is exactly what that is all about. So you can go to sunday.earth to get involved. I am the ambassador of Sunday, and in the spirit of leaving you with hope, I sing, Here Comes the Sun. Here comes the sun, little darling. Here comes the sun, and I say it's all right. Little darling, it's been a long, cold, lonely winter. Little darling, seems like years since it's been here. But here comes the sun. Here comes the sun, and I say it's all right. Little darling, the smiles returning to the faces. Little darling, seems like years since it's been here. But here comes the sun, little darling. Here comes the sun, and I say it's all right. Sun, 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 here it comes. 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 Little darling, I feel the ice is slowly melting. Little darling, it seems like years since it's been clear. But here comes the sun, little darling. Here comes the sun, and I say it's all right. Sun, 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 here it comes. Sun, sun, sun. Here it comes. And it's all right. Sunday, September 21st, Sunday.Earth. Thank you, Meg. Thank you, Bloomberg Green. Love y'all so much. We're going to win this thing.